Hello all again. So I promised you this video, I think like 2 days ago on Monday. Well, actually yesterday was Monday, so I guess that's about when I promised it, and I'm about a day behind. Sometimes these things happen, but this year the reason why it's happening, or this semester, is because of the rather shocking week we've had, just as Americans, as citizens, and if not citizens, as immigrants to this country. It's been a crazy week, and my entire syllabus for 350 is always the same. I mean, it's always the same. Nothing ever changes because Aristotle doesn't come back to life and change what he said. And most people aren't rewriting the Greek or Roman philosophers. So I generally have a pretty good footing when I start this class. That's the good news. The not so great news is that the word rhetoric was thrown around last week like I don't know. I can't think of a metaphor that's appropriate, because the word was utilized so many different ways and none of them were helpful. None of them said, oh, hey, you know what we should do? We should have an entire field of study in rhetoric, because they all sounded the same. They all sounded negative. They all sounded like it's the worst thing in the world that you could practice. You should incite violence with it, or you could. You shouldn't incite violence with it, but you can. And also that, it's still the empty, flowery words that mean nothing, sound and fury signifying nothing, to quote Shakespeare. But that's not at all what it is. And if it was, we wouldn't have to have an entire semester long class in it now, would we? So let's start off by first just saying I would love to hear from you guys about what you think rhetoric is. The way it's been utilized in the past week has not given it a great reputation, but it's never really had one. So I want to know what experiences you've had with rhetoric. And so I'm going to be putting up a Blackboard discussion board. That's sort of redundant, isn't it? But on the discussion board, a question, and this is not for a lot of points or something. There's no right or wrong answer. I just kind of want to see what you all think of the word, because we hear it a lot and we don't think much about its meaning. The second thing I want to do in this video is tell you that there are literally thousands of definitions for rhetoric. Is that helpful? No. So what I like to do is start all of my classes off with a definition. It may not be a definition that you agree with by the end of the semester, and that's fine. It may not be a definition that even resembles what you think rhetoric should be, and that's fine. But what I like to do is start with it because it's the oldest definition of rhetoric that we have, but also because this way we can talk about definitions of rhetoric in comparison to the first one. All right. So it does, I guess, suggest my age that this is still my favorite definition of rhetoric. Although Joe Biden Jr. gave a really interesting definition of rhetoric recently, where I said, that seems like an acceptable definition of rhetoric for me too. So let me give you Aristotle's, because that's where I start. Aristotle's definition has three parts, and those three parts, all three of them are very important. The first part being that it is an art or a skill of knowing. So it is an actual practical skill of knowing something. What is that thing? All the means of persuasion. Does not just include the 7 parts of the communication cycle, okay? We're not just saying feedback and the feedback loop and the interference and all of that matter, the encoding and the decoding, not just that, but also the rhetorical situation in which it occurs. We'll talk more about the rhetorical situation because I'm going to be giving you a reading on it today. All right, so you'll have a lot of time to read it, don't worry. And there's no book assignment reading, so hopefully that helps. The rhetorical situation includes power situations, power structures, okay? And so when you're looking at a rhetorical situation and you say you understand rhetoric, then you are engaging your knowledge and your skill with that knowledge of seeing all of the available means of persuasion, and the last part, the third part, in any particular instance. Now, all three of these, the art or skill of knowing, all the means of persuasion in any particular instance, those are incredibly important, all three of them. And I have to be honest with you, I just said it backwards. I never say the definition that way. I always say the art or skill of knowing in any particular instance all the means of persuasion. But it came out differently this time. Why? Because all of a sudden, that in a particular situation has become incredibly important. For example, if you're just online and you're just saying, what if we got together and took some weapons and stormed the castle, in this case, the Capitol? Does that do anything? Well, all rhetoric is considered an action. And so I guess in that sense, the metaphysical sense, yes, you are doing something. But how seriously should we take that? How, sort of, how important is it that somebody said that? Well, online, just talking, just, as we used to call it, BSing while we were having a beer or whatever it is that you drink, or wow, I just did that to my hair. I think we have static electricity in my house. Um, how like some of us just sit around drinking milk and cookies talking about this stuff. Sure. Doubtful, but possible. But if it's online, it must be okay because it's a bunch of people spread out across the country, potentially the globe, who aren't all together and don't have, an arsenal behind them, that this becomes worrisome. Until it did, right? Until it did. And so right now I'm watching my TV set. And I don't actually have TV. I don't have cable TV or anything. I only have YouTube. So I could stream a few things. And I stream Fox News, I stream CNN, I stream C-SPAN, I stream whatever looks like it has the thing I want to know about on it. In fact, I was watching a very, very good in-depth report from Fox News, and my husband walked in the living room and said, why are you watching Fox News? And I said, I am not opposed to any one particular um, channel or network because they all have their own problems. Okay, whatever that is. The fact that Shepard Smith walked away from Fox News should be the first indicator that things are not good at Fox News. But the reporters who were handling this particular discussion were reporting news, and that's really all I wanted. That's what I needed. And I didn't care where it was coming from. Um, what all of these news sources are talking about: CNN to Fox to C-SPAN to MSNBC, political commentators and actual news reporters, and also the talking heads that are hosting television shows. All of them have been saying that all of a sudden they may start paying attention, not them, but I don't know, the FBI might start paying attention to what's going on online as an indicator of what could actually happen. Hey, great idea. We've been telling you guys that for literally decades now. And I'm not kidding. Rhetoricians, scholars in English departments and in communication departments have been trying to tell people that when we say things, oftentimes we mean them. No matter how unrealistic they are, we hope that they can happen. Now, this particular thing, I mean, unless you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? You guys know what that is, I hope. Magic? I didn't play any of those. Cards Against Humanity. There you go. Whatever it is that you do in an imaginary world. But online, political rhetoric is not an imaginary world. In fact, imaginary worlds is not one of the three genres of rhetoric according to Aristotle. He said there's three places that we use rhetoric. It's forensic, deliberative, and epideictic. That's a lot of words. Don't worry, you'll read it in your book, so you'll see that again. But essentially what he's saying is that the three places, wow, let's try that again. The three places that rhetoric occurs is in courtrooms, in Congress, or legislation, and in sort of ceremonial speeches, such as funeral orations, wedding toasts, graduation speeches, commencement addresses, all that. Okay. And so you'll notice I said funeral orations instead of eulogy. It's just, we got to sound more, we have to sound smarter than we are. Right? But the eulogy, right? Those are the only three places that rhetoric occurs. And if you think really hard on that, you might end up agreeing with it, even though right now you're like, no, that's not the only three places. That's not the only three subjects. That's not the only three areas for rhetoric. Of course not. But then consider that Aristotle also says rhetoric is for the masses. It is not for interpersonal communication, or even what I do every morning in the mirror, intrapersonal communication, right? I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. Gosh darn it, people like me. I can get this done. Come on, do dash, pick yourself up. I don't say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because that's not a physically possible thing to do. And also because that seems to be more of a Midwestern thing, and I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. By the way, no jokes about the Steelers, okay? I fully expected them to blow it. I fully expected them to blow it. I just didn't think it was going to be to the Browns. I'm in recovery right now. Be patient with me. All right. So, I'm from the Northeast, where we don't say that, but, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get moving is what I have to say to myself every morning. That's not rhetoric. That's me talking to myself. That's intrapersonal communication, or as I like to call it, bastardized psychology. I mean, it is what it is in a lot of ways on that point. Interpersonal communication, trying to get somebody to dance with me at, I don't know, where do you kids go these days? Zan? I doubt you go anywhere with masks, right? That would not be fun. But if you're out, talking to a small group of people and you're eating dinner, that's not rhetoric. I don't care how persuasive you're attempting to be. That is not rhetoric. It has to be on a mass scale. And that's where people are really starting to get confused with online communication. Is it just personal, like me writing my journal, and then, so what if 500,000 people watched it or read it and decided that, hey, she has a great idea. Let's go to the Capitol and storm it, which, by the way, I would never do. I'm just too old and too tired. But more importantly, um, being at the Capitol, if you've ever been there, you would know how devastating that was. I tell people all the time, um, they talk about September 11th of 2001 as if, everybody still knows what we're talking about. You don't. Some of you probably weren't born then. I'm sad to say. I was getting my PhD, so I remember it very well. But more importantly, I had been to the World Trade Center many times prior to that, and I knew how huge the enormity of this was. But some people were like, yeah, it's like if a couple blocks in St. Louis got blown up. No, no, it's not like that at all. So rhetoric is supposed to be used to make things as big as they are, not to explode them bigger than they are. But for some reason, when we look online, we find rhetoric, that is to say, it's available to the entire world. This video is public, for example. Anybody can watch it. If I reach a certain amount of people, I'm practicing mass media, mass persuasion, mass rhetoric. Well, then people get confused. Isn't this one-on-one communication? Am I not just talking to you one person, or you 60 students I have in this class, God help me, this year? Or only you who are interested in rhetoric? No, it's a mass experience if a certain number of people are watching it. And if a certain number of people are influenced by it, then it's definitely not one-on-one communication. And there is an ethics that goes along with having that much influence over people. And that gets me to the position of power, right? I said the art or skill of knowing in a particular situation. all the means of persuasion. In that situation, the rhetorical situation may include power. If my boss is talking to me, that's different than if I'm talking to my husband. Um, my leopard geckos don't talk, but they certainly know who's in charge. Obviously, it's them. A lot of us, our dogs or our cats are in charge of us, we feel like. But the truth of the matter is that I don't want to talk about it in terms of master and listener, but in terms of who has power and who doesn't. Is it okay for me to say it, but not for you to say it? Is it okay for an Italian to criticize Italians and a Catholic to criticize Catholics, but it's not okay for anybody else to do that? What are all of the components of the rhetorical situation doing to create opportunities or restrictions for the rhetorician, for the speaker? Those are some of the questions that we are going to explore as we go through here. So let's start with the definition of the art or skill of knowing, in any particular instance, all the means of persuasion. We will look for other definitions of rhetoric from a bunch of other different philosophers and scholars. But the first thing we have to do is just get our feet wet in what the word rhetoric might mean other than what we hear on our televisions. So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to start slowly. I am going to put up an article tonight. I'm going to put up a discussion board tonight, and I'm going to put up a timeline tonight, I think. I hope that's what I do. The article is entitled The Rhetorical Situation. It's from 1973, which, by the way, is a year before I was born. I just want to point that out. At least I think it's from 1973. And that particular article is going to talk about the rhetorical situation and all of the things that Aristotle sort of put into the idea of rhetoric and others. The name of the author is Lloyd Bitzer, and he is still cited as the preliminary or the primary source for the rhetorical situation, definitions thereof, and everything that flows from that. The second thing I'm going to provide you with is that discussion board where you guys can start talking with me, with your peers, etc. But also that discussion board to ask you just to give me your feedback on what you think rhetoric is. And if you want to respond to each other, feel free. That's okay. It's totally fine. Pretend we're in a classroom. Respond to each other respectfully, of course. And then finally, I'm going to put up a timeline, which is going to be brief, honestly, but it's something that my students have told me I should put up every year for people. It's a timeline I drew a long time ago on a whiteboard, and they said you should put this up and make it available because it gives you sort of a look at everything we're going to do in the entirety of the semester, which is kind of cool. If you look at the syllabus, you're going to have 2 papers. You're going to have 3 exams. Those exams are taken online at your leisure. So why do I have them? You can open your book. You can find the answer. Well, 2 reasons. One, I still have people not do so well on them. And number 2, which I can't explain, but number 2, if I know that at least once you had to go search for that answer in your book, I know that you had to do some sort of reading, and that's what I want. So less than a test, it's making sure you're staying on task, those 3. The 1,000 points you can earn in this class. That's a lot. It's a lot of points. Why do I do that? I have a lot of reasons for doing that, but all you have to do is earn 900 points. You earn 900 points, you get an A. You earn 800 points or above, you're going to get somewhere in the B. You earn 700 points or above, you're going to get in the C range, and so forth. If you score below 600, well, first of all, you won't, because you and I will have a talk long before we get to that point. All right? So give the syllabus a look. Let me know if you need anything, what you need. And I'm going to go ahead and post those things right now so that they're available for you as soon as you go look for them. I'm looking forward to the semester. It sounds complicated, but it's really not as bad as you think. And we've got a lot of examples coming out of our government right now. So that's pretty exciting. I'll talk to you all real soon.